Take a moment to look down at your hands right now, at the nails resting obediently on the tips of each finger. Most of us keep them neatly trimmed and clean, using stainless steel clippers or finely grit-coated nail files. In modern life, cutting our fingernails and toenails is a basic personal hygiene habit, one so ingrained that we perform it almost unconsciously, like an instinct without a second thought. In fact, if our nails grow just a little too long, snagging on a computer keyboard or tapping loudly on a phone screen, we immediately feel irritated, uncomfortable, and rush to find a tool to resolve the issue. But close your eyes for a moment and take a journey back in time with me. Not just back a few centuries, but much further than that, tens, even hundreds of thousands of years ago, into the primal dawn of humanity. In a wild world where metal was entirely unknown, where the very concept of a nail clipper was unimaginable, what did our distant ancestors do with those nails that never stopped growing day by day? And the most crucial question is, what terrible things would actually happen if ancient humans let their fingernails and toenails grow too long? To answer this question, we first need to understand the biology of nails. Fingernails and toenails are made of keratin, a tough protein that is also the main component of hair, animal horns, and hooves. The primitive function of nails was to protect the sensitive, soft flesh at the tips of fingers and toes, while assisting the hands in gripping, scratching, and manipulating small objects. In modern humans, fingernails grow at an average rate of about 3 millimeters per month, while toenails grow slightly slower. If not cut or worn down, they will continue to lengthen, curling into bizarre, hardened, and sharp spiral shapes. In today's society, someone who grows their fingernails dozens of centimeters long might be viewed as an eccentric record breaker, but they can still survive because others care for them, feed them, and help them with daily activities. However, in the unforgiving wilderness of prehistoric times, long nails were not a personal lifestyle choice. They were a slow and agonizing death sentence. Imagine a prehistoric human, let's call them a Homo sapiens living about 50,000 years ago, who for some strange reason did not have their nails worn down, allowing them to grow long like curved talons. The first and most dangerous threat this individual would face wouldn't be giant predators, but an invisible enemy: bacteria. The hands of ancient humans were constantly in direct contact with dirt, dead animal carcasses, raw meat and blood, feces, and countless other natural pathogens. A set of long, twisted fingernails would become the perfect reservoir for bacteria, an ideal incubator for parasites, fungi, and deadly pathogens. In an era where the concept of soap or antibiotics simply did not exist, a mere scratch to relieve an itch, or the motion of bringing a hand to the mouth to tear off roasted meat, would introduce massive amounts of accumulated bacteria directly into the body. Sepsis, tetanus, or fatal intestinal diseases would quickly strike down this vulnerable creature before they even understood what was happening. But suppose this individual was lucky enough to possess a superhuman immune system and escaped the bacterial onslaught. The next barrier brought by long nails would be total uselessness in labor and survival. The human hand is one of nature's greatest evolutionary marvels, featuring a highly flexible opposable thumb that allows us to grip tools securely. The ability to craft and use tools is the very boundary that separates humans from the rest of the animal kingdom. However, when fingernails grow too long, they curl backward, piercing the palm or obstructing the bending of the knuckles. You cannot tightly grip a rough branch to fashion a spear. You cannot hold a piece of flint firmly to nap it. You cannot stretch an animal hide, and you certainly cannot scale steep cliffs to escape the fangs of a saber-toothed tiger. A hand burdened with long nails becomes weak, clumsy, and entirely stripped of its grip strength. In a hunter-gatherer tribe, where every individual had to contribute physical labor in exchange for food, someone with hands crippled by long nails would become a massive liability. They could not hunt, could not dig for roots, could not gather firewood, and the harsh laws of nature would swiftly eliminate them. That covers fingernails. But what about toenails? The tragedy of having excessively long toenails in ancient times was arguably far more horrifying. Prehistoric humans spent the majority of their lives on the move. They were nomads, walking dozens of kilometers every day across treacherous terrains, pushing through thorny jungles, traversing jagged rocky fields, or wading through slippery swamps. Their feet were their sole and most vital means of transportation. When toenails grew too long, they would pierce through crude animal hide shoes or point straight outward if the person walked barefoot. Every step would be pure agony. Long toenails could easily get snagged on tree roots, vines, or rocky crevices. The sudden impact of tripping while moving quickly could rip the entire nail right off the nail bed, causing excruciating pain and heavy bleeding. Worse still, long toenails subjected to the pressure of body weight would easily dig into the surrounding flesh, creating severe ingrown nails. In a wild environment, such a wound would inevitably fester, swell, and become necrotic. Just one infected toe would cause a person to limp, severely reducing their movement speed. Falling behind the tribe meant becoming easy prey for stalking predators, or simply dying of starvation and freezing temperatures when left all alone in the wilderness. Through these scenarios, we can clearly see that letting nails grow too long in ancient times went entirely against the instinct for survival. But nature always has its own miraculous ways of operating to prevent such disasters from happening. The truth is, prehistoric humans almost never had to worry about their nails growing too long because their brutal lifestyle provided them with an enormous and highly effective natural nail file. Unlike modern humans, whose hands are mostly used for typing on keyboards and holding pens, the hands of primitive humans were heavy-duty tools. They used their bare hands to dig into hard earth for edible roots. They used their hands to skin hunted animals, scraping the fat off thick hides with rough pieces of stone. They carried coarse wooden logs on their shoulders, chopped wood, and smashed rocks to extract sharp cores. They kneaded mud to make pottery and wove stiff, dry branches to build shelters. Every single survival activity each day created continuous and intense friction against their fingertips. The keratin layer of the fingernails was constantly worn down, chipped, and cracked as it clashed with dirt, stone, and wood. This rate of abrasion happened so rapidly that it balanced out or even exceeded the growth rate of new nails. The same applied to toenails. Constant running and jumping barefoot on coarse sand and gravel, or the friction against rough animal skins used as snowshoes, inadvertently became the most frequent and ruthless pedicure process imaginable. Nails that barely had the chance to sprout were broken off or filed blunt by the rugged terrain. It is safe to say that the sheer harshness of the living environment was the most perfect nail clipper, keeping ancient humans' nails at a specific short length, just enough to protect the fingertips, but never given the chance to become a life-threatening obstacle. However, there were always exceptions. There would be times when nails were not worn down evenly, or someone fell ill, broke a bone, and was bedridden in a cave for months, causing their fingernails and toenails to grow out and become a hindrance. In such situations, when nature could no longer do the filing for them, ancient humans solved the problem using the most instinctive tools available. The first and most common tool was their own set of teeth. Like other primates, humans have an instinct to bring their hands to their mouths to bite off jagged nails, overlong nails, or irritating dead skin. The teeth of prehistoric humans were incredibly strong due to chewing tough, coarse food daily, making biting through a piece of long fingernail an effortless and quick task. The nail-biting habit that many modern people struggle with today, often viewed as a bad habit driven by psychological stress, is actually a remnant of ancient survival instincts still lingering within our DNA. Besides using their teeth, as the brain evolved and humans learned to use tools, they also learned to utilize their surroundings for body care. If a toenail was too thick and hard to bite off, they might seek out rough stones by the stream, or sandstone slabs with coarse surfaces. They would sit down and vigorously rub their fingertips and toes against the stone's surface, much like how we use a pumice stone to scrub our heels today. This physical friction would slowly grind away the stubborn keratin. More complexly, when tools made of flint or obsidian were sharpened into razor-like blades, they could easily be used to shave or cut off excess nail growth. Trimming nails with sharp stone was certainly not easy. It required great dexterity to avoid cutting into the flesh and causing bleeding. But it serves as evidence that human awareness of personal care had begun to spark since the Stone Age. Perhaps, on those nights gathered around a flickering fire, alongside sharing food and telling tales of gods, early humans also spent time picking lice off each other and using small, sharp stones to help one another trim away bothersome toenails. The story of the fingernail took a bizarre turn when the flow of history carried humanity out of the hunter-gatherer era and into the age of agriculture and civilization. When humans began to farm, domesticate animals, and build walled cities, society started to show clear class divisions. Peasants, artisans, and slaves still had to endure grueling manual labor, and their nails continued to be worn down by soil, mud, and tools, just like their ancestors. But for the elite class, kings, nobles, and officials who never had to lift a finger for heavy work, their hands began to change. No longer subjected to the harsh abrasions of nature, their nails were free to grow long. And ironically, the very thing that would have been a seed of death in prehistoric times now became a supreme symbol of power, wealth, and social status. In ancient civilizations like Egypt or China, growing long fingernails became a massive trend and a way to declare to the world, "I am a superior. I do not need to perform manual labor to survive, because I have thousands of others to serve me." Egyptian pharaohs used henna dye to adorn their long nails. In ancient China, particularly during the later Qing dynasty, concubines and aristocrats elevated the art of nail growing to a new level. They grew their fingernails to lengths of over 20 centimeters, and to protect those fragile, easily breakable nails from even the slightest daily activities, they invented nail guards. These guards were exquisitely crafted from gold, silver, jade, or tortoiseshell, and were engraved and studded with sparkling precious stones. Those who wore long nail guards couldn't even dress themselves or feed themselves. Everything required the assistance of servants. Evolution had created a truly strange loop. The inability to labor caused by long nails, which was once a death sentence in the Stone Age, was now worshipped and deliberately cultivated by those at the pinnacle of society to prove their extravagance. Looking back at the entire course of history, from a rough stone by a stream, from instinctual biting teeth to solid gold nail guards, and finally to the small, convenient nail clippers sitting in your drawer today, we can truly appreciate the long journey humanity has traversed. Our nails haven't changed. They are still made of keratin, still growing at the exact same rate as they did hundreds of thousands of years ago. But how we treat them and how our environments and society interact with them is the most vivid reflection of the evolution of human civilization. From being a survival tool worn away by nature, it transformed into a biological threat, then morphed into a bizarre class symbol, and finally returned to its proper aesthetic and personal hygiene function in the modern era. So, the next time you pick up a pair of nail clippers, listening to the steady click, click sound and watching the nail clippings fall, remember that you are performing an incredibly modern act, a privilege that our distant ancestors never had. The safety, comfort, and cleanliness we enjoy today were built upon millions of years of agonizing survival, where even a single misplaced overgrown nail could determine the line between life and death. You are living in an era of absolute safety, where the wild claws of ancient primates have been tamed, resting quietly and obediently at the tips of your fingers.